Obviously going to be the nicest day of 2024, and I'll take sole responsibility for that. I believe people have to step up when they make a mistake or when they're owed a favor. And they questioned, they wanted to do this next week on the 21st, and I have not one but two family birthdays that day coming to my place. So I begged them for an alternative day, and I know that really messed with your schedule. So here we are, burning daylight on the best day of the year, but I do say thank you to that. I want to say thanks to the hosts, the Sanders County Democrats, and to Mr. Mark Sheets. Mark, I appreciate your kind words there, and like I said, I did learn this at Thompson Falls, by the way, there. So Glenn Garrison and those guys demonstrated dress code for that. So I am very honored to be here, part of this program that's continuation. I understand there's been some very distinguished speakers in the past, and I was flattered that I could be a part of such an august group. So thank you for that very much. I tried to be nonpartisan when it comes to public education because I believe that's what we have to be. I mean, we all have our background thoughts and comments, but I try to stay that way. So if it appears like I'm riding the fence today, it's because I am. Because when the rubber meets the road, you have to ride for the brand. And in this case, it's the kids. It's the kids that we have all serviced in various capacities. And there's times in my life where I've marked an X next to a Republican, and there's times I've marked my X next to a Democrat and or some write-ins because I felt it was best for the kids. So that's how I operate. But as things evolve, obviously certain groups tend to stand out. So today we're going to be taking a look at this at an approach where we start at a ground level from basic communities and we work our way upward. That's kind of what we outlined in a real quick meeting last Friday. I was crazy enough to jump up and choose the positions. I'm going to talk about some local stuff, and then Jenny's going to talk about some more state stuff that combines and bleeds down to the local. And then, of course, we have someone here that is a candidate for the big position that could take a look at the overall arching position of education there. I took a more popular, or more positive outlook on education because it's easy to get off in the weeds of negative things, and I don't want to do that. But I want to say, remember, I chose this position to go first, and I did it with intention because I believe it's like going to a concert. Say you've saved money to go to your favorite rock concert, and you know at 10 o'clock the band's going to roll out and it's going to be great. But just prior to that, they have somebody that gets up, they're going to warm things up, they're going to get to dancing and stuff like that. And then they have the guy that tests the microphone, right? I'm the guy that tests the microphone. If this were a rock concert, I'm going to be Polka Pete, the accordion player, and it's going to be tough because I'm missing a few fingers on the side where the keyboard is. So, but I do believe, and I'm pleased to see that she just walked in because I had a little nod up here. I do believe in paying your debts, and I have a debt that I owe to Ellen Childress, and she just walked in. But Ellen is a strong supporter of public education. She and I were colleagues as it first started at Plains. Absolutely. And one time I called upon Ellen and I said, you should entertain the thought of becoming a school board member because that's what we need. And she did so. And she's had every opportunity to excuse herself from that position, and I understand she hasn't and may not even going forward, but... She's running again. I heard that. Not that I check things occasionally, but I do. Anyway, I owe that to Ellen and to everybody else, and that's one of the reasons I said yes when I was quizzed whether I would do this. So I was nervous about it because it's been a long time since I've spoke to people. But I see I'm blessed because we either have Jesus up there or Joseph. I'll take either. And then I have my personal guardian angel showed up today, and that's Lila Sears. And I give a nod to her because she literally saved my life at one time. And I thank you for that, Lila.
Awesome.
So what I want to focus on here, and remember, most of us are educators, we're strong supporters. So I'm going to make a few plugs about reading, okay? Because that's one of the basic tenements that I discovered is crucial. So you're going to hear me throw out some of my favorite books, and if you haven't read them, I suggest you do, and I have them interlaced in here, so stick with me. But I want to talk about the role of public education in our local communities. the inevitability of change is going to occur, and perhaps what the future is going to look like and what mechanisms are in place to see if that happens, okay? So, again, I have 3 books I think are top. You should be reading them if you haven't, and 2 others that I would like you to look at as we go. Role in our communities. First of all, we always talk about the pride of public schools, and that's true. They're very, very much the center focus of all of our communities, past and present. And I believe will continue to be so in the future. And then, of course, the role of public ed is to make sure that the populace has an education so that democracy can thrive and can exist. That was the goal 200 and some years ago. It's been the goal of nations ever since that come to the United States and copy our way of education. I love it when people say, oh, the schools are gone bad and things like that, but yet we have nations that are beating down the door to get over here and study what we're doing. So naysayers aside, things are going right. A lot of teachers around here, and I know you guys have heard the things about how many decisions a teacher makes during the day. You take a school the size of Thompson Falls or Plains, 2 of the larger ones in the community, say you have 70 staff members and each one of those makes 500 decisions a day, and you multiply that out. Are there going to be some that go wrong? Absolutely. Probably 3 or 4, which is a very low percentage. But think about how many went right every single day, 180 days a year, of those people that have dedicated their lives to education and what it means to be part of this community. So a little bit of fun. I want you to play along with me. Just raise your hand as I go through these words. It's a word game. I want to know if you recognize these, okay? Red Devils. How many know the name Red Devils? Thank you very much. How about Horsemen and Trotters? There's a popular one in my family. How about the Blue Hawks? The Blue Hawks. How about the Savage Heat? Recognize that? All right. How about this one? The Demons. Oh, careful, we're showing some. So how about if the Demons, by the way, were Dixon. It used to be the Dixon Demons, and actually they had a high school there, and I'll mention that here. How about the Bison? Dixon's K-8 school is called the Bison. They changed their name because of their affiliation and their locality within the reservation over there. You'll see it when you drive by. There's 2 great big bison out on the fence. Home of the Bison. So the Demons have become the Bisons. How about the Eagles? Ha ha, Daisy. Didn't know you were going to be here, but I'm glad you are. Yeah, Trout Creek. I know it's Trout Creek. And I am a stickler for announcing things, but you know what? I do that intentionally just to get a rise out of people. Does. And I apologize. And it works. But Trout Creek, Montana, home of the Fighting Eagles. So, how about Savages? Yeah, I was a Savage. Graduated in 1987 from Hot Springs. We were the Savages. Since transition. It's ironic. Good friend of mine in education his entire life, Jim Holland, the principal at the time, when they were talking about changing the name. And I have no problem with Savage Heat. I think it's great, ties everything in there. But Jim put forth the name, the Hot Springs Black Bears. There's not a school in the state of Montana associated with black bears. Lots of grizz, lots of animals. And of course, if you've spent any time in Hot Springs in the fall, they come roaring right over the hill from Plains, and they're in everybody's apple trees, and they're quite a nuisance. But it would have been fun to have the Hot Springs Black Bears at one time. So, how about this one? School District number 8. Do you know where that's at, Karen?
No, it was here.
Well, yeah, it was permanent originally. School District number 8 was permanent. For those of you that know Les Carpenter, a retired teacher in Plains, I gave him the set of natural history encyclopedias from Perma that I somehow acquired when I was a superintendent of Plains. And then afterwards I got to thinking, man, I wish I had those back, because I'm almost certain my mom would have used those books, because she graduated from 8th grade in Perma before she moved up to Hot Springs. Lila's nodding her head. Lila knew my mom forever. Here's 2 more left, 2 more word associations. How about the Bombers? Right here, Paradise with the Bombers. This was their mascot. By the way, I played basketball in this gym. Here's the half-court line for this side of the gym, right here. The half-court line for that side of the gym is over here. It's the free throw line. So when you took the ball out of bounds, you only had to go from there to here to beat the 10-second rule. That was wonderful. One last one. How about the Gophers? Or sometimes Golden Gophers. You're gonna be embarrassed when I tell you. Camas Prairie. Camas Prairie was known as the Golden Gophers or the Gophers. Interesting how that is. But it reflects to the pride that people have in the communities and what role it has. Again, I mentioned Dixon used to have a high school. Lone Pine used to have a high school. Garson Gulch, east of Hot Springs, had an elementary school out there. Camas Prairie, which is now there. Paradise, Perma, White Pine. White Pine had a K-8 elementary school there. It was that little white building. We drive by it every single day. It's a house now. My dad can remember delivering firewood there when it was a school back in the late 40s. And I believe Heron had a school. Is that correct? Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I thought they did. And I believe there was one at Eddy also, which leads me to anybody in here, and I know some do. Remember Norm Allen from Thompson Falls? He has two boys there, Sean and Mike Allen. Sean's the big guy you see him in the wrestling match. Norm was a teacher forever. Those of you that knew him or may have known him through his Black Powder and Rendezvous days, they called him Rawhide, big raw bone guy, great guy. Norm took it upon himself one day to show me the blueprints for the Sanders County High School. At one time, Sanders County was going to create its own cooperative high school. Just like Lincoln County, there was not going to be Thompson Falls Blue Hawks and Hot Springs Savage Horsemen, or Savage, that's a combination, sorry, Savage Heat. We were going to combine it and have one school. They went so far as to have a committee. They spent the money, developed the blueprints, and actually had the land under contract at Eddy Flats, I believe. And then guess what happened? Public education happened. Thompson Falls and Plains and Knoxon, all these little schools said, no, we don't want this collective. We want our own pride. We want our own sense of educating our kids. We want local control. So they scrapped it. Coincidentally, that's about the same time that the Plains School Board decided to move the existing school from Highway 200, which is now the dental office, over to the current campus, okay? This was 1951, by the way. The blueprints are dated 1951. Jeff Sean has those somewhere. I would like to make sure they get, Mark, maybe that's an assignment for you to go. I'll go up in wrestling, you go through his back room and see where those are at. I'll take Sean over Mike any day. Mike's tougher, I think. So anyway, I'd like to know where those are at. But the point is an identity. It's who we are. It's healthy. It was competitive. It became the center focus of everything. Teachers were godlike. They still are. Now, some perspectives have changed, but that is the role that we have here. By the way, a little fun one. What school in this county was originally, their colors were maroon and gold? Paradise was. So was Plains. Before they became orange and black, in the I think it was 1917, for 2 years, they were maroon and gold. But there were so many schools maroon and gold, they elected to create their own identity. And I know this because I found a letter, like a varsity athletic letter, a P that's maroon and gold. And I believe I left that in the safe. I did not take that one with me, although some of them I did. So anyway, this all rolls back to a very fun thing that I used to talk about. I love music because there's so much history in the lyrics of music. But the Beach Boys song, and I can't remember what song it is, but the lyrics had said, be true to your school like you would to your girl or your guy. Okay? That's what it meant for local schools. And it still exists today. It's just in a little bit different perspective on how we look at it. Now, the purpose of education, again, was to educate the populace so that we had these concepts of democracy. That's always true and will always remain true unless we have a drastic change. What has been altered are the mechanics to deliver that, okay? And not necessarily in a bad way. Bricks and mortar structures became, and still are in many instances, they are the heart and soul of our small towns and our communities. They are the mascots, the colors, and the programs. Programs is a key thing because it's going to develop differently. I'm going to segue through, and one of my first books is coming up here. Most of you guys have known me forever, and I make no doubt about it. I'm a firearms enthusiast, as most people in Montana are. I'm a collector, I'm a supporter, but only with education. And I had one person one time said, well, they sure don't make them like they used to, referring to firearms. I said, no, they don't. They're so much better now. And the person was just like, well, I can't believe that this one's not. I said, well, get out of the cheap section. Go to where the quality is. Pay for what you want. I said, it's better. The techniques are better. The practices are better. What goes into it's better. The same thing is true for education. People say, education is not what it used to be. Look at them and say, you're right. It's so much better now. We have evolved. We have learned what to do, sometimes in the face of tremendous pressures. But nonetheless, it is not like it used to be. It is way, way better. Side note on firearms. This is the first of my favorite books I think everybody should read. It's The Rifle by Gary Paulson. If you're a children's literature person, Gary Paulson wrote the famous book Hatchet, which, by the way, Hatchet, I heard, has been rumored to be banned in some places. And if you've ever read Hatchet, it's about a little boy who's lost in the Canadian wilderness when his plane goes down. He was going to visit his dad, and I understand the reason they banned it is because his mom and dad had been divorced, and people took offense to that. Sally Braun told me a long time ago the reason divorces cost so much is because they're worth it in certain instances, and she's not wrong. Anyway, The Rifle, short synopsis. It's about a firearm, a black powder firearm that was created during the period of the American Revolution, by hand, everything done. Barrel was lapped, it was formed, the wood was stocked, was carved. Flintlock, not percussion, old school. Is it a fizzle pan? I believe it's called a fizzle pan with the flint that comes down. And it's the history of this rifle, from it being made, utilized during the war, passed on to the farmer that went into the Ohio Valley as manifestation, determination took over, and we spread across the United States. It was passed on to the grandson who went to the southern part of the Ohio Valley and helped develop it. On and on and on and on. And the story ends in modern day times after all of these transitions through the Civil War and all these things. And it's hanging in a place of respect above the fireplace in the home. It's beautiful. It's a piece of artwork. That's how I see firearms, artwork. It's a tool. It's an artwork. It's Christmas time. Dad decides it's time to light a fire. Lights a fire in the fireplace. A small ember floats up, drops into the fizzle pan, and it discharges. The gun was loaded. Shoots through the wall, across the street, through the wall, and kills the little boy next to it. Dead, instantly, just like that. The moral of the story? We forgot our basic rules. After all that time, nobody stopped to check to see if the gun was loaded. Everybody's ever picked one up in Montana. I was telling somebody here earlier today about Don Smith, my hunter safety instructor, one of the founding members of the 10th Mountain Division, freed Italy, World War II, the hard way. Thom, you point the muzzle down, you treat it like it's loaded, the whole thing. Drilled it into my head. I was 12 years old. By the way, Lila, Don Smith and Don Woods signed my hunter ed card. I still have it to this day, from 1979. What happened there was a lack of self-discipline. We forgot to practice discipline and check to see if the rifle was loaded. That was so unfortunate. It's a simple read. I used to buy these books and hand them out to kids. The kids that didn't want to read Shakespeare. I'm sorry, Jeff. Not all of us want to read Shakespeare. Some of us do, some of us don't. Yeah, no kidding. So I used to buy books, both as a teacher and as an administrator, and we'd get that tough kid. There was 2 or 3 from this community here, and one of the other books I want to mention later. I'd hand them out to them. Read this one. Talk to your teacher about it. See if they'll substitute it for your reading list. The Rifle is a good book. Anything by Gary Paulson is a good book. By the way, Gary Paulson, very conservative person. Very conservative. Raised in Minnesota, was a hunter and a trapper. If you really want a gory story, read his one called Guts. It's about trapping wolves and what happens to a white-tailed deer when a wolf gets a hold of it. Nature. It's an interesting read. Gary Paulson, good stuff. Back to my point. Education is better. The teachers that we have today are coming out of university and they are trained so much better than we were 30 years ago. Jeff, 31 years ago. I'll give you that one, okay? We utilize tools, data-driven technology, or data-driven decisions based on valid tests and tools on a day-to-day basis. Accreditation standards are and are always improving, and all of this is done under the guise of local control. We forget this when we hear people say, oh, education's gone down the tubes. No, it hasn't. These things still exist. They happen every single day. They happen in Hot Springs. They happen in Dixon. They happen in Plains. All of them. Trout Creek. They happen in Trout Creek. They do. So what happened is when I was at SOUP, I had a little motto in my office, and it was a mathematical equation. It said, education is quality of life. To me, it was like a math problem. If you wanted to increase your quality of life, you had to increase your education. And likewise, if your education increased, your quality of life would be. Now, it could go up, it could go down. Many of us are happy at different places. But that's how I viewed education. It determines who we are, who we want to be. We know it, we're going to make it match. Public education has always done a great job of allowing that to happen. From our lowest achieving students to our highest achieving students. Their quality of life is based on their education and what they do to put into it. This is what I learned from all of that. One, that education is a lifelong process. It doesn't stop when you're 18 years old. It doesn't stop when you were in the 8th grade. It doesn't stop when you transition from kindergarten up. I think, Ellen and I had this conversation on the sidebar, I think education may truly be experienced when we're no longer here, when we pass. I think that might be the greatest lesson any of us will learn. The other thing I've learned is that education is based on relationships. There's all sorts of pedagogy, all sorts of mechanics. It's the relationship between the people involved that make public education positive or not. And then the last thing is, never can forget this. It's so easy to overlook it when you're trying to deal with all these things. And Daisy and I have been in these boats and stuff. There's so many things happening at once. Don't forget the basic things. Reading. Reading was one of the primary starts to education, and it is still the fundamental building block. That's why my notion for books here. When I was SOUP and I'd interview people, I had this question. I love this. I'd ask them, I said, what do you teach? You were a candidate interviewing, gone through all the questions, checked all the boxes, and I'd say, so you walk into the grocery store, and you're new in town, your name's Jeff Wheeler, and they walk up to you and say, hey, I'm Jeff. And they, oh, what do you do? I'm a teacher. And they say, really? What do you teach? And I would just wait for the answer. And it's always the same. Sometimes it's, I teach English. I teach math. I teach history. I teach 3rd grade. I teach reading. The answer I was looking for was students. If a person was clever enough to say, I teach students, I had, and they had me. I was going to hire them the very next day because they understood the relationship. And it doesn't matter what the discipline is. It matters that relationship, and that has to be fostered, and it happens. People that say education isn't good, they don't understand the relationships. They're seeing those 1 or 2 comments or negative things or decisions that didn't go exactly as planned, and they're disregarding all of that. All of the hard work that Mr. Nelson has put into student X, because he recognized that student X wasn't going to get this, but had to have this in order to keep going on and on and on. I've witnessed it time and time again. Everybody has. It's been in education. The quality educators that understand this, they realize that it's based on trust, equality, and the quality of their work. I'm going to segue into my next book. This is an oldie but a goodie. Most people in here have probably done it. Norman MacLean, The River Runs Through It, the novella, okay? It's a great story. Has anybody here not read A River Runs Through It? Wonderful. How about Logging, Pimping, and Your Pal Jim? That's the one right after it. If you're from Thompson Falls, America, you should read that story and go ask Mr. Wade Nelson what's significant about that. Jeff, do you remember why? It was, the main character was his grandmother. And I don't think she was picking huckleberries, is what Wade told us at one time. Anyway, I had the honor, and I'm going to really mess up Daisy's recording here. I had the honor of watching a master's dissertation on Norman MacLean at the University of Montana one day. And I have no idea why I tripped into campus, but I sat and I watched it. And the person presenting, I don't even remember the gender of the person, but I remember them presenting the argument. And if you've read MacLean, More Than a River Runs Through It, you'll understand this. He was described as always being profane, but never vulgar. And there's a difference between profanity and vulgarity. In my opinion, vulgarity should never be used, especially in public, but profanity on occasion has its place. And I'm going to practice that here in a little bit. As I move forward, I'm going to tell you this. Remember, Norman McLean, he's a great guy. I'm just the accordion player over here. Kids have a built-in bullshit detector, as most people do. You know it. Somebody walks up to you and they start talking to you, you're thinking, oh my land, where are they coming from? And that relationship breaks down. That person trying to tell you whatever their position is or whatever, or vice versa, if you come off to somebody and they perceive you as full of BS, the relationship erodes. You have to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I've told young teachers this time and time again. I learned this the hard way. I tried to buffalo a couple of them, and I knew instantly they saw right through me. And I lost everything. I had to backtrack, get back on there. When people understand that, let me rephrase that. When teachers understand that, that's accountability. They are accountable to their students when they realize that that relationship to teach whatever it is, government, Mark, what were we teaching? Advanced math and calculus. Trigonometry is not going to come easy unless you have a relationship with those kids. I promise you very much. The second thing, the perspective of what this is in education today. There's changes afoot. We know that. There have been. Now life in education is digital. The 3 R's have been replaced with STEM, STEAM, STREAM, all of these other ones. If you're not familiar with these, we can address them later. But it's an evolution. Is it bad? No, it's what's happening. Don't deny students that are native to technology and a chance to learn because we're foreigners to it and we haven't taken the time to pick it up. I've watched this countless times. Mr. Nelson does an excellent job utilizing technology in his lessons. And some people used to question it. I'm like, why? That's what the kids know. He's made a relationship. He's working with them at that level. The other thing that happens through this to allow these changes to occur, and they are, change is inevitable. It's the one thing that's a constant. We know that. It's how you master it and how you handle it. It's the support groups that we have. Montana High School Association for extracurriculars and athletics. If you don't think this gymnasium wasn't a classroom, you missed it when Jamie French, how many people here know Jamie French? Used to be the principal, teacher down the road. I was playing against Jamie in Hot Springs in the 8th grade. My coach was hollering at me to run a couple plays, and it wasn't sinking in. I was having fun. I think we were winning, maybe not. Jamie had some really good teams with kids that were surprisingly not great athletes. I'm running down the court in Hot Springs. Jamie grabs me, pulls me off the court, says, Chisholm, this is what your coach wants you to do. And I listened to him like this. The game's going on. Everybody's looking at him like, what the hell is he doing? And I looked at him and I said, okay, coach. And I went right back in. I think about that all the time. I don't know if Jamie remembers it, but it was a classroom to him. I was a student. He was going to make that point because I wasn't catching to what my coach was telling me. That's a fact. It scared the devil out of me. I didn't know what was happening. Other things that are support groups. PLCs, public learning communities, the master right there. They support teachers in everything they do. They allow for sharing. They allow for new ideas. The Montana School Board Association, which is more than just a bunch of lawyers together. They truly are there for the support of the school boards, which are tasked with being the liaisons between the public and what's happening in the schools, in the bricks and mortars, or what's happening in school that's not in the bricks and mortars. Teachers organizations. I don't know if Mr. Nelson still does this. I'm glad he's here today, but at one time when I was teaching, had his job and I was teaching history, I used to have the school pay my dues to the Montana Historical Society because they were such a support for history teachers. And there's a myriad of groups out there for math, science, elementary, all of them. Administrative ones. Curriculum cooperatives, all of that is in there. SAM, School Administrators of Montana, MASS, the Montana Association of School Superintendents, for principals, for teachers, for everybody. School boards. School boards are the biggest support of public education. People sometimes don't see them that way. Sometimes the school itself, meaning those people in there, don't see it that way. And the big one, the Office of Public Instruction. That is one that has the ability to tie it all together. All these support groups enable the most unique strength that is present in the Montana Constitution, and that's Article 10. Article 10 has enshrined education in this nation with one simple adjective: quality. It doesn't say Montana will provide an education for its students. It says, quite literally, Montana will provide a quality education for its students. That word has defined everything we've done since 1972. Second, another book. This is not one of my top recommended ones, but if you want to understand the 1972 Constitutional Convention in Montana, a book called We the People by Jim Lopatch was a professor at the University of Montana, one of mine. You'll recognize all the names in there because they're the people from this valley in Helena that helped draft the 72 Constitution and put Article 10 in there. By the way, most of our Montana Constitution was borrowed from the state of Delaware. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We took it and applied what we needed. We did add an adjective to the word education, quality. That actually created the Montana Quality Education Coalition, where they sued the state of Montana to make sure we had enough money to say, you're doing it right. You know what was crazy? They won. You know what was sad? Is the schools didn't follow through with some of the judges' requirements to absolutely make it undeniable, and we're still battling that. But it's still there. We have that there. We the People, Jim Lopatch. By the way, Montana has a constitutional requirement that every 20 years we revisit it. So in '92, we looked at our Constitution, they formed a committee, see if it needs updating, see if it needs to evolve. They did it again in 2012, and they'll do it again in 32, 52, and 72. They're on brilliant, especially when it came to public education. That and Indian Ed for All, two of the best things that's ever happened there. Educational evolution to date has been a long but prosperous journey. Here's my next book. This is, you'll love it here, where we're at. It's by Andrew Garcia, and it's entitled Tough Trip Through Paradise. Ellen's laughing because she knows I've handed out dozens of copies of this. Matter of fact, I just did it for 3 people at Christmas time. Tough Trip Through Paradise is the story of Andrew Garcia as a young man in 1860 who came out here as a scout for the Army when they were still liberating the West from the Native Americans. And it ended up as his memoirs. And it's a remarkable story of Montana history from a very unique perspective, because he didn't approach it from a white perspective. He didn't approach it from an Indian perspective. He approached it from a, we're all in this together in human perspective. He was there when Angus and Catherine McDonald from the Mission Valley sent their son Duncan down to bury the dead that were murdered at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Andrew Garcia was there. Duncan rode from Missoula down there on horseback. By the way, if anybody's curious, yes, that is the namesake of my youngest son, Duncan. Tough Trip Through Paradise. It's a great read. Always read the preface of the book. Always. Never ignore it. Because that's the fun part with this book. Do you know how they discovered it? Andrew Garcia had been dead about 12, 13 years-ish. Don't quote me on that. His family was selling, he ended up becoming a rancher, by the way, after several marriages, in the Bitterroot. His family was selling the property and they found a powder shack. Remember the old powder shacks where every rancher had a box of dynamite? He had written his memoirs, his life story. Felt that it was not valid for anything, and he used it to wrap up the sticks of dynamite. And when they were disposing it, they found it. And his grandson published it posthumously for him. It's a great story. If you want a Montana history, 2 or 3 kids from here at Paradise School, they were never going to get English literature. They were never. And I talked to Dad. And this is a name that many of us heard. I said, Terry, have your son read this book. And to this day, he still thanks me for it. It fit. It was the relationship. He didn't care about Shakespeare, but a cowboy in the 1860s in Montana history, he lapped it up. I don't know if he ever read another book in his life, but he did. So that's my my must-reads there. The next thing is the future. Where are we headed? Success will depend on the decisions that create positive change. Period. That, by the way, is the universal University of Montana's definition of an educational leader. So those of you who've gone through that, they said, what makes a good leader? You create positive change, not negative change, not maintain the status quo. You do something small or large or whatever it is to create change going forward, perpetual motion that's always positive. Bricks and mortar will be here, some shape. We're attached to them. We live in them. We dwell in them. We refurbish them. Camas Prairie creates a 501c3 and calls it Camas Prairie Neighbors. I made a lot of mistakes as an administrator in Plains, but the one that I got right is I did not bite when this school was closing, and they said, because this was a part of our high school district and this was an elementary, they said, Thom, we want you guys to take over the elementary school at Paradise. And I just froze. All I could see were pitfalls. Why? Why would I do that? Why would I say we're going to steal who you are? Why would I say we couldn't maintain these buildings? We couldn't. So Carol Brooker, another lady that many of you all know, she and I had a conversation and we started going through Montana Code Annotated. Turns out there's another way to let a school no longer exist. And we did that and became community property of the county. Wasn't it $1 that we purchased this for? Bought this, and look what it's become. It's a spot where I can show up and I've got Jesus watching me. My mom would laugh at that. I looked up there and I thought, oh boy, I'm in trouble. But you know, that's what it is. I didn't want to do that. And I'm so glad that we didn't. I'm so glad that we paused, took a breath and said, wait a minute here. Don't tear apart a community. And the people that work hard to create this, a lot of them are kids that graduated here, walked these halls, ate in that lunchroom. And I'm not talking about the ones from 20 years ago. I'm talking about the ones that were here during the 40s and 50s and 60s that wore that merry-go-round out the first time before they had to put new boards on it. So bricks and mortars will be here, and it's going to be shared with digital learning. Specialty arenas and areas, not will develop. I put will, I should have changed that verb. They are developing. It's already happening. You know why? Because the School Board Association has a brilliant legal team, and they have foreshadowed this for years. In your public policies that are available to all districts through the School Board Association, there are policies that you can adopt that allow public school to evolve into the future. And it's going to happen. We're going to have an ecology class in Thompson Falls that students in Billings Senior High are taking. We're going to have online. It doesn't mean that Thompson Falls is going to cease to exist. It's just being added to. It's evolving. It's making it better. And it should, because that's how the rest of the world is. And we need to make sure our kids do that so they can compete. They can continue on as they go forward. Okay, it will continue as a basis for education. However, and I'm segueing into the next ones, do not forget, it's better than it used to be, and it costs money. Don't be fooled by the cheap route. Sometimes it's better, but in general, you got to spend it to make sure it happens. So we're going to talk about probably one of the most often misunderstood concepts of public education. Jenny's going to talk about the funding formulas and the mechanics there. Don't forget that you can actually obtain a PhD in this discipline if you want to. And very few people have had the opportunity to do that. We lost a great representative in the Bitterroot 2 or 3 elections ago. She knew more about public education finances, and when it came down to approving House Bill 2, the money bill, when she was beat out by a very radical adversary, public education lost one of the greatest friends in Helena, and we need to make sure somebody backfills that. Moving forward, how will this happen? It will happen through leadership from the community that still believes in the Chop Creek Eagles, that still believes in the Dixon Bison, that still believes in the Blue Hawks. And it's going to be done with leadership that has honesty, integrity, and they act as a role model, period. Can't say one thing and do another. You have to live it. My final book, Cornelius Hedges. Does anybody in here know who Cornelius Hedges is? Has anybody heard the name Hedges? Hedges Elementary? Hedges Elementary in Kalispell. North and South Hedges dormitories at Montana State University. and a plethora of educational buildings named Hedges throughout the state of Montana. It's named after Cornelius Hedges. Cornelius Hedges was the first state superintendent of schools for Montana. He was also the first librarian in the territory and then became the state librarian. The final book was actually published by a good friend of mine from Libby, Montana. His name is Reed Gardner, and it's entitled, For This and Succeeding Generations, the Cornelius Hedges Story. And the cover of it shows Cornelius reading to his daughters. Reading to his daughters in the 1860s. That is my final book. You want to read it. It's a good one. So I am blessed. I actually have Cornelius Hedges' secretary organizer. It was his personal one when he belonged to an organization in Helena. And I have, at one time I had 29 individual pieces of his barrister bookcases. They were brought up to Missouri on ferry boat to Great Falls, brought to Helena by pack mule, and I saved them from the dump in Helena by a phone call one midnight on a Friday night, literally just about midnight. Reed called me, a friend of mine that wrote the story. He said, the organization is throwing them out. I said, oh, that's too bad. He goes, no, Tom, they're literally throwing them out as we speak. They're packing them to the dump. I said, it takes me 3 hours. I got there about 2:30 in the morning. I loaded everything up I could and left with them. And it's just sad that it happened. But it was evolution. There was something taking place there. Cornelius Hedges. If he was alive today, I think he would be in awe of our public education system, when it started, when he sat down to read to those 2 little girls. And he'd be very, very happy and proud that we've practiced the we've put aside the naysayers, and we've said, you know what, our kids are worth it. And the relationships that we develop to make it are worth it. The last thing I have before I turn this over to Ginny, self-governance absolutely requires self-discipline. And when we lose it, the rifle goes off. We have to practice that. Anybody know where that comes from? Paul Harvey. Oh. And now you know the rest of the story. That's it.